Why is Nigeria in the throes of what some are calling a kidnapping epidemic? Sometimes depicted as terrorists, other times as bandits, attackers targeting schools, leading some to compare with the 2014 Chibok attacks by the jihadists of Boko Haram. We'll do our own comparison and revisit the same question as 1 decade ago. Why would any human being abduct children? In some cases, nursery school children. An ordeal for the victims and their families. Bad timing for Africa's most populous nation, what with the Trump administration threatening military intervention over what it calls genocide against Christians. How does the government of Bola Tinubu handle the sudden pressure from the evangelical right in Washington? More broadly, how to address insecurity in a nation where locals feel abandoned by the state and in some instances feel they have to choose between mounting their own vigilante self-defense groups or striking deals to allow their attackers, for instance, grazing rights for cattle and access to water. The third option is fleeing for good from the impoverished north. With what consequences? Well, today in the France 24 debate, we're asking why the wave of kidnappings. With us from Abuja, she's a co-founder of the 2014 Bring Back Our Girls advocacy group, human rights activist Aisha Yusufu. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Also from the Nigerian capital, political economist Hussaini Abdu, who's worked extensively on the issue of access to education. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
From London, Najim Animashau, non-resident research fellow at the African Policy Research Institute. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Francois.
And geopolitics consultant Emmanuel Iga, the author of the Nigerian Handbook. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Remember, you can always listen, that's right, listen to the France 24 debate wherever podcasts are streamed. By the way, it's not just school children, parishioners, travelers, onion farmers. More than 400 kidnapped in the past 2 weeks across vast swathes of the north. The latest include a wedding party with the bride and her maids of honor taken in the northwestern state of Sokoto, and in the north-central region of Koji. There's also been an attack on parishioners, grabbing headlines, of course, the November 21st kidnapping of more than 300 school children from St. Mary's Catholic School in the remote village of Papiri. That's in Niger State. Schools in the north have since been shuttered as the agonizing wait continues for loved ones.
Some of the children escaped by the will of God, but my son did not. I was told that he was helping the younger one to escape through the fence, and that's when he was kidnapped. We are very sad. I am especially. He was my last surviving son.
Aisha Yusufu, let's begin with what happened there in Niger State. At this point in time, what do we know about what happened in Papiri?
You just went up a little bit, and I think the end part of the question.
What do we know about what happened in Papiri 2 weeks ago?
Similar to what happened in Chibok, over 11 years ago. So what we have are terrorists who came into the school and abducted our children and took them away. It's been the same thing. Like now we have about 50 of them escaped. Just we have during the Chibok abduction also 57 escaped out of the 276 that were taken, and so now we have 50 have also, escaped, and you're still having quite a number of them still in captivity. About 315 were taken away, and the parents are still waiting for them. But what makes this one very painful is the fact that you have little kids, and most of them are in primary and secondary school. Only about 12 of them I think 14 of them are in secondary school. So you're talking about children who are, good number of them below 10 years of age. And then the other thing, that you see is the fact that these are usually children of the poor. And then it seems as if in Nigeria, when you're poor, you're nameless, faceless, and voiceless. And the government doesn't put in that effort, one, to protect you, and second, to rescue you when you're kidnapped or abducted.
Children of the poor, what's the motive? Is it to ask for a ransom? Is it a political motive?
Oh, so far right now we have a kidnap for ransom economy, like someone described it, going on, and so at this moment, it seems as if the spotlight is on the whole issue, and the government has been forced by the voices from outside the country to ensure that they speak on it. And so there has been this renewed wave of abduction. It's not as if the abduction wasn't there, but the spotlight is now more on it, and which is also forcing the hand of government to negotiate with these terrorists, and bring them in. But the question that a lot are asking is, why is it that at the time that these abductions are going on, there is something that is no longer coincidental, in the sense that military are usually withdrawn from that particular area, and it seems as if the terrorists have, a field day for them to operate the way they want to. Those are some of the questions, that Nigerians are really asking. It seems as if the life of a Nigerian citizen really does not matter to the Nigerian government.
When you say, when you say the military withdrawing, are you saying that the soldiers are in cahoots with the bandits?
Well, that's what it seems like, because over time, repeatedly, even right now, the defense headquarters have called in some of the soldiers, especially the ones that were in Kebbi, to ask them, why did they leave? I mean, they're leaving, and an hour later, terrorists are coming in, especially in places where there was pre-information, there was intelligence that terrorists were going to attack the school. And then an hour before the attack happens, all the soldiers leave the school, and the children are vulnerable, and they come in. And according to the policemen that were there, the terrorists overwhelmed them in terms of the numbers and the arms that they had, and they couldn't fight back. So, it looks as if there's a sabotage, and those are the things that Nigerians are asking. Why is it always? And this is not the first time. Even when Dapchi abduction happened, I think that was around 2018, you had that also, where military operatives were withdrawn, and immediately after the terrorist attack. And even with this, this is a region where usually you will see military checkpoints, but they're able to move this large number of people without any interception. So there's so much going on that at the end of the day, Nigerians are asking, is there a collusion between the military and the terrorists themselves?
Husseini Abdu, is there a collusion?
I wouldn't know if there is a collusion, but like Aisha said, there are circumstances where such coincidences happened. And I knew for the incidents you were describing in Kebbi, the military hierarchy are currently investigating that issue. But there's a growing concern about the ease in which these armed groups access schools, and the number of time they actually spend marshalling small children into locations where they could control and actually negotiate. And this has become a trend since the Chibok incident. But the reality also is that Nigeria is dealing with a complex web of crises, largely in the northern part of the country and the central Nigerian area, with pockets of incidences in the southern part of the country. The nature of this crisis of kidnapping of children is that it has become an industry. There is a bandit economy has actually emerged in the last few years, where you kidnap, and then there is that complex network of syndicates across different phases, from the arms group through the negotiators, and sometimes through even security agencies and all that. And therefore, a lot happens during this period. So what we are seeing is that the rains have just ceased. During the rainy season, operations sometimes become a bit difficult for this arms group. And after the rainy season, you get certain level of escalation. But this particular time is more than the normal escalation that we experience. And there are a couple of hypotheses and theories being bandied around. In one, guys, is the fact that some states are negotiating, some communities are negotiating with the bandit. Sometimes they keep to those terms and then they leave those domains and move to new domains where they can easily perform, where there is no contractual commitment, either with communities or state, and therefore continue to perpetrate such action.
And when you say negotiate, what are they negotiating? They're just paying them off to go away?
Yeah, you pay them off. They give you conditions. You have times. Sometimes in some places during rainy season, you sign up to a pact, and then they allow you go to farm. You pay off, you farm, and then during harvest season, they ask you to pay again, and then you pay, and then they allow you to harvest. And if you don't, you can be killed or you leave that access. But lately, they have communities, because the state has failed to secure those communities, they negotiate. And sometimes the state actually facilitates such negotiations and they pay them. They pay them to leave or not to attack them. And so when you have those pacts, they go to areas where this didn't happen, because the process of engagement is not strategic, it's not tactical, it's not comprehensive. And so they use these kind of things to negotiate. In other times, they also use children to shield themselves from attacks by security forces. So when they have that number, they can use it to shield themselves and then force the government or the military to withdraw and actually get into negotiation with them. There are new hypotheses around whether the escalation is also not because of the threat by the United government to come after such people, and whether they are also not using these children as shield against such actions, which I don't necessarily buy. I don't buy into that. But my argument here is that it's a huge economy, and it's an economy that runs into billions of Nigerian naira. The kind of resources that people pay, particularly in the rural area where these massive extortions happen. Some occasions actually come to the aid of community and pay, and actually pay where the communities are actually not able to pay. Politicians from such communities also pay. And so it's a very complex web of issue, but basically it's a reflection of the crisis of governance in the country and the failure of the state to protect its citizens.
All right, well, Niger state governor insists that the government is doing everything possible to secure the release of those abducted in Papiri. He was speaking last week.
It's not a time for blame game. Our mission today is to see how we can rescue these children and all those that have been kidnapped in that incident. As such, we are calling on all the security agencies, civil society organizations, organized level, clerics, please focus on the rescue of these children.
Please focus on the rescue of those children. Najim Animashaun, your reaction.
But most governors have what is called in Nigeria a security vote. And the last administration was wondering why they didn't use that security vote to enhance the security for their people. Because the governor is the security officer of his state. Now, Niger State is actually one of the largest states territorially in Nigeria, and it has the vast forest networks. But the issue here goes beyond whether or not there are security failures by the federal government. We have to understand that the federal government is dealing with insecurity in 5 of the 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria with different security challenges. In the Northwest, it's banditry that has now morphed into a kind of criminal terrorism because the bandits themselves are now learning from the terrorists in terms of their tactics, weapons, and deployments. And the terrorists, Lakurawa as they're called, are learning from the bandits in terms of the revenue systems and the economic vandalism that is caused by banditry. So that is becoming quite a toxic brew, particularly in the Northwest. But in the Northeast, we have the ongoing insurgency with ISWAP and Boko Haram. And recently, a one-star general was ambushed and assassinated or executed in cold blood, and it was videoed and went viral in Nigeria. In the North Central, we have, which is where these girls were kidnapped, but the eastern part of the North Central, which is Benue State, Plateau State, Benue State in particular, is actually one of the highest incidences of kidnappings and killings and deaths in Nigeria. The highest is the Northeast. The second highest is Benue State in the eastern part of the Middle Belt. So while this has got a lot of attention, right, in Kebbi State and in Niger State, the entire country has a proliferation of these activities, and each governor in each state is the chief security officer of his state. I read a recent report, and I just finished with this. I read a recent report that in Katsina State, which is in the core north, bandits essentially operate and govern, I suppose, in quotation marks, in 20 local government areas. 6 years ago, it was 4 local government areas. Now it's increased to 20. So we can see it's a spiraling problem, but it's not just the federal government that can resolve this issue. The president recently asked local communities to come to the assistance of the federal government in its security operations in those communities.
And Najib, just a question on this, because we're going to talk about in a minute about the international reactions, those in the United States, for instance, who want to paint this as a Muslims versus Christians story, which it's not, as you've been describing. There are those also who see this as a question of traditional herders who have taken up guns, and so it's a herders versus farmers story. Is there any grain of truth to that?
It's a complex problem, of which the herders farmers is one of the issues, and there are a lot of drivers and accelerants for that. Essentially, the herders farmers issue started off with a herders issue, where herders were the first people, were the first victims of kidnappings. Their cattle was kidnapped, and of course, if they lose their cattle, they lose all their livelihoods, and so they started to carry weapons. And the next thing was that they graduated from rustling cattle to rustling people. And that's how we got to the kidnapping of people. And of course, that has expanded as the population has grown. More grazing areas have been converted to farmland. And that has now basically accelerated the conflict between farmers and herders. And this is not just in Nigeria, it's outside Nigeria, pushing further south as the desertification is increasing and the population is also increasing. So you have incursions into areas where people are farming, where hitherto some of that farmland may have been grazing areas that has been converted into farmland because of the need of populations to farm. So that is one of the issues, and that is predominantly in the north central regions, particularly in the eastern part of the north central region, which is Plateau State. It's now coming into places like Kogi State. You mentioned Kogi just now about a kidnapping there. It's in Niger State where these kidnappings occurred, and it's now reached the southwestern part of Nigeria, which is Ogun State. And the southwestern part of Nigeria is actually quite unique in the sense that it is a very plural society. It's mixed Muslim and Christians, and there are no religious issues there. So if there's kidnappings in that part of the country, then it's not really a religious issue that's driving it.
Yeah, and we saw, for instance, Emmanuel Liga, last week, 25 Muslim girls released from a government comprehensive secondary school in the Kebbi State town of Maga. Most of the others remain unaccounted for. It's interesting because the language employed by the government, they're saying they secured their release. What does that mean to secure their release?
I think they just want to give the impression that they carried out their release. But that seems to be in doubt. I think many people are saying those girls kind of saved themselves. They ran away from their captors and found their way back.
And what you just heard there from Najim was sort of concentric circles of explanations, the largest being climate change and population pressures. And of course, the smallest, the one we've heard from all our panelists so far, is mismanagement of security issues by authorities.
Yes, I think this situation has been on and degenerating for quite a long time. The first time we started having an encounter with violence of this type, Boko Haram, was in 2009. It's long time, but it's not too long all the same. I believe the successive governments haven't done enough to just, take control of the situation, take the bull by the horns. This has started since the time of Goodluck Jonathan. Then we had the period passing through late President Buhari, who was an army general, and he couldn't find the solution to a problem which was military somehow. And what I think in some cases, either they underestimated the capacity of these terrorists and bandits. The bandits came a bit later after Boko Haram and kind of proliferated across the length and breadth of the country, practically mainly for kidnapping for ransom. The Boko Haram initially was a massive kidnappings like in Chibok, but all boiled down to creating a situation you can negotiate with the government. And you negotiate for what? You negotiate money, huge amounts of money that the government has to release, although the government says they are not paying anything.
Right, they've even outlawed negotiation, they say, officially. Last week we saw a raft of announcements from President Tinubu. He had announcing that he would hire more police. He also authorized the intelligence service to deploy forest guards to protect remote areas from armed groups. Of particular interest is Rugu Forest National Park, which straddles several states in the north. There you see it on the map there. There's this Aisha Yusufu. Are the bandits, is that where they are, inside this one national park?
Well, absolutely not. Like when you've heard, my co-panelists have talked about, they are all over the country. They are everywhere in Nigeria. And I think sometimes when we call it a farmers' herders, conflict, it's way beyond that. It's terrorist, against the people kind of conflict. And the situation is also a bit dicey in the sense that we have states and we have governors that are called chief security officer, but constitutionally, looking at the security architecture of the nation, they really do not have any powers. They cannot even command a policeman, whether a constable, a corporal, or a military man, anything. We've seen that several times. What we do have right now is the fact that the whole country, it's literally ridden by these terrorists who have found ungoverned spaces, and they're the ones governing it. what you've had hitherto was the fact that the Nigerian government sort of like ignored the killings that was going on amongst the people until the pronouncement by President Donald Trump and also the United States, designating Nigeria as a country of particular concern. And this is what has brought the whole issue on the table, on the front burner, and making them at least, put in the effort, because before this, all they did was silence. Even though, when people were being kidnapped or killings happening, no matter how heinous they were, you found silence and disdain from the government. They really didn't care about the lives of the people.
Yeah, according to a recent report published last month by the European Union Agency for Asylum, Nigeria has some 371,000 federal police. More than 100,000 of those, though, are assigned to protect politicians and VIPs. Hussaini Abdu, how many do you think of those 100,000 will be reassigned?
Well, it is the government has instituted an order to withdraw such people, but this is the first time we've had such pronouncement in the past when security situation escalate and their citizens cry out. Government has often learned to make such pronouncement. Of course, this is the first time coming from this government, but we have had that from previous leadership of the country. And they do that, and after a while, everything fizzles out. I think sometimes people don't understand the dimension of the crisis that we are dealing with. It's a multiple layer of crisis, and I personally describe it as social crisis. The violence and insecurity, like Nigerians like to describe it, is a manifestation, it's just a symptom of a deeper structural crisis that the country is experiencing, especially in the northern part of the country. Years of exclusion, poverty, illiteracy, lack of access to basic, look, check all Nigerians' human development indicators, and you will see how it manifests in all these areas. There's a strong relationship between the development crisis in these locations and the spate of violence that is actually being experienced. Earlier, colleagues here have spoken about climate change and other related factors that have continued to shape this issue. When government take a security approach to a bigger structural concern, I don't blame them, because you have to respond to the immediate issues. It's not nice to hear people dying every day, children being kidnapped every day. You want to respond to those issues. You want to deal with them. But the reality actually is that the structural condition that you are struggling with does not even allow you to achieve that. And I think the government needs to begin to have a more comprehensive, look, you are going to recruit more policemen. This is a country where the police could not recruit for over 3-4 years because there is a conflict between the security management and the management of the police, meaning the police hierarchy and the police service commission. They couldn't agree on how that recruitment exercise will be conducted. All through Buhari's government, they couldn't do the recruitment. Now we are going to recruit 20,000 more. You want to recruit just 20,000 more. And politicians are already sharpening their gun, and what they want to do is about how do you share it amongst us? How do I get more young people from my constituency to just get employer enrolled into the police force? So there's a complex crisis, and until the government recognize that social dynamics and what is shaping this dimension, why is it that when you are dealing with this crisis or this form of violence, our initial attention was in the Northeast, like other panelists mentioned, and over the last 15 years, it has remained intractable. But for those of us on ground who have been studying this, the banditry did not emerge after the crisis, or what Nigerians love to describe as Boko Haram crisis in the Northeast. I think they almost came out at the same time. At the time people were reporting about Boko Haram, some of us were studying banditry in the Northwest, and we were reporting it. And as far back as as 2007, 2006, some of us already writing about banditry, largely at that particular point, cattle rustling and all those things were rigged. And it was a crisis in that note that led to a massive migration of herders to the central Nigerian area over this period. Then urbanization, the growing population density, the encroachment of cattle paths, and all those things escalated. And there's other ecological drivers and all. So it's a complex web of issues. So, but when we hear this simplistic, more police, more military, more these, of course we need to, or more vigilante. Some people are arguing that, oh, communities should arm themselves. And we have seen how that has also led to the escalation, especially in the northwest of the country.
All right, so
the conflict between the brink and others,
Yeah, so the banditry underreported at the time a decade ago when the world's attention was on Boko Haram.
Absolutely.
Today,
it was underreported. The international attention was on the Boko Haram, particularly after the kidnap of Chibok girls, and that is understandably so. But we were dealing with this issue in the northwest, particularly in Zamfara State.
Today, there's pushback from the international, from those inside of Nigeria who see the approach to it taken from the outside. Among those calling for action, for instance, Trinidadian-born pop star Nicki Minaj, invited last month to an event hosted at the U.S. Embassy to the United Nations in New York. She denounced the targeting of Christians there. There you see Nicki Minaj approaching the podium with Mike Waltz, the Donald Trump's ambassador. Going further, well, the President of the United States himself.
If the Nigerian government continues to allow the killing of Christians, the USA will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria. We're going to do things to Nigeria that Nigeria is not going to be happy about and may very well go into that now disgraced country, guns a-blazing, to completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible, horrible atrocities.
So, Najim Meshan, why is Donald Trump willing to go guns a-blazing?
Two things. The aid has already been cut, and it is partly the cutting of the aid that has led to the increase in the violence that we're seeing. There was a lot of support that, particularly for displaced people, there was a lot of support that was being provided by the USAID and various other donor agencies. And not just the USAID, there was a lot of US funding for the United Nations, which also funded the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, which has stopped. So Donald Trump is actually part of the problem, creating this spike in kidnappings.
And
the second thing is,
go ahead.
The second thing is that Nigeria has the largest Christian population in Africa, even though the Christians are not the majority. They are a large population in Nigeria, and American evangelical networks have built Nigeria into a symbolic frontier of spiritual and cultural combat. And Nigeria presents proof of Christian persecution. So inside the United States, there's this framing of Nigeria as a Christian genocide zone. And organizations and multiple mega churches have lobbied Congress to get Nigeria designated as a country of particular concern. Certain Christian groups in Nigeria and certain groups from the southeast in Nigeria have also sought to make capital of this momentum. So obviously, with the US midterms coming up in 2026, and the evangelical turnout will be critical for Donald Trump and the Republicans to retain their majority in Congress. I think this is a mobilizing factor. But Nigeria has actually been quite quick in addressing this and being able to engage with the Americans. There was a delegation that met with the Americans, and it's interesting for me that the rhetoric has changed from in the Christian genocide, guns a-blazing and Department of War preparing plans, to Nigeria and America setting up a joint working group, a non-binding cooperation framework, and the protection of Christians and quote unquote other vulnerable groups.
Yeah, because
what this tells me is that bureaucracy and diplomacy has quietly neutralized the political theater.
Or is it happening inside of the United States itself? You have, on the one hand, those evangelicals that you mentioned, Donald Trump creating a White House faith office. It's led by a Mississippi-born televangelist called Paula White Kane. On the other hand, his own advisor for Africa, who's kind of pushed back on this whole genocide concept against Christians, is Masih Boulos. He's the one who's negotiating on Sudan, for instance. And he himself made his fortune in Nigeria, Najim.
He did. Masih Boulos is a remarkable character. He's a Christian Lebanese man who made his fortune in Nigeria and ended up being Trump's in-law. So he's well versed. He actually worked for a French company called SCOA. He's been able to demonstrate to the United States administration that, this is a far bigger, more complex problem than we see. And of course, he's been in touch with the Nigerian government through his former Lebanese boss by the name of Gilbert Chabouri, who is very familiar with you in France. And so together with the Nigerian delegation, they've been able to push back very effectively to create this nuanced position where the Americans are now coming to work with the Nigerian government, with this joint group, and with this MOU to protect Christians and other vulnerable groups. What that hopefully means would be that security cooperation will increase. Now, one very interesting sign that I can say in the last few days has been the announcement of ambassadors. Now, Nigeria hasn't had ambassadors to any country since Bola Tinubu became president. And the announcement of ambassadors, particularly to the United States, the United Kingdom, and France, and those people that are going to be the ambassadors of those countries is very interesting. All three countries will have very, very senior security people, very experienced security people as the ambassadors to those countries. And that probably is more telling of what is going to happen going forward in the relationships to address these concerns. I think one of the things that the delegation made clear to the Americans was that, if Nigeria falls apart, then the wave of migrations to Europe and the rest of West Africa will be uncontainable. So it's worthwhile helping Nigeria to secure its society and to stabilize this wave of criminal activity.
Okay, so Najim,
yes.
I was saying, Najim there stating how Nigerians have been quick to come together and push back effectively against Donald Trump's threat of intervention. However, there are some who say maybe foreign intervention isn't such a bad idea. Take Nigeria's former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, speaking last Friday at an event called the Plateau State Unity Christmas Carols. This is in the Middle Belt city of Jos.
Our governments seem to be incapable of protecting us. We are part of the world community. If our government cannot do it, we have right to call on the international community to do for us what our government cannot do for us.
Emmanuel Iga, we don't have too much time. Is that just domestic politics we heard there, or is that serious?
Well, I don't think it's domestic politics just for politics. I think a lot of Nigerians believe probably this is the way to go, because we've been waiting for action, and action didn't come. Just as Aisha Yusuf said, coincidentally, Donald Trump spoke and backed the Nigerian government, and now the government has woken up. That's what we're seeing now. We don't know how far that is going to go. They are recruiting new troops in the army, new policemen. But I think somebody like Olusegun Obasanjo, who is a very experienced retired general, should know what he's talking about. When the Chibok girls were captured, there was some form of international cooperation that was set up, and America was part of it. the UK, France, I think even Israel too, plus the 4 countries that were in the front line of the Boko Haram: Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. And it worked very well. The foreign partners were providing the needed intelligence. They have the equipment for that, and they were helping with their equipment too to plan with Nigeria's troop commanders, which way to go to counterattack the Boko Haram.
But this was a remote cross-border area here, northeastern Nigeria, near the borders of Cameroon and Chad. What we're witnessing today is very different.
Well, yes, this is a situation that seems to have concentrated on the Nigerian borders now. But somehow, I remember a couple of Americans were kidnapped in Zamfara State, or was it in Kebbi? And we know for sure that the Americans organized a rescue operation within the Nigerian territory. They came, just picked up their American brothers and zoomed off with them in the night. So how did they do it? It's superior weapons, superior intelligence, because these were either Boko Haram or bandits that kidnapped these guys. So we know Americans are capable of doing what Donald Trump is saying he would come to do in Nigeria, but Nigerians are proud people. They are very nationalistic. So a lot of them are very careful about this offer by Donald Trump.
Aisha Yusufu, can outside help?
Well, at this rate, I think just like former President Olusegun Obasanjo said, Nigeria is part of the international community, and if there's a need to ask for help, there's nothing wrong in asking for help. And you know, when we talk about Nigeria has turned to like a safe haven for terrorists. The Americans that they had kidnapped was done in Niger Republic, and they now came into Nigeria because they feel they are safer in there. All of this on the issue, let me just add something to say. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, when you have to be strategically killed for your death to matter, it's been politicized, tribalism has been used, religion has been used, so that sometimes some certain people do not see certain killings as long as it's not one of their own in terms of religion or tribe. But at the end of the day, what we do have is that indeed there's a genocide happening, and it's happening in Nigeria, and Nigerians are being killed. And of course, we need lives to matter. And in any way, if we can get that help, wherever that help can come from, it will be a welcome development. On the issue of the United States, with the pronouncement that they made, what I expected from the Nigerian government was to sit down with them and also call other international community to say, yes, we have a problem. Can you help us in terms of, weapons, in terms of intelligence gathering, in terms of, training our troop, whatever help that can be done to ensure that every Nigerian life is safe. Now we're being hunted. Life in Nigeria has become nasty, short, and brutish, and that's not the way it's supposed to be.
All right, what's for sure is Nigerians will not remain passive. Just to ask, if you will, this fed-up driver who spoke to the French news agency AFP at a Lagos bus station last week.
There's an Hausa man here, there's an Igbo man here. I'm a Yoruba man. Can any of us now say Nigeria is safe? No. Wow. That's it.
All right. We'll have to leave it there, unfortunately. I want to thank you so much, Aisha Yusufu and Husseini Abdu, for being with us from Abuja. Najim Animashaun in London. Emmanuel Iga, thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.
Thank you.